It was a quiet November afternoon in 1970, when a hiker stumbled into a lonely valley in Bergen, Norway. But what he found there would shake Europe's darkest secrets. Lying among the rocks of the remote Isdalen valley was the burned body of a woman. Her face was unrecognizable, her belongings deliberately destroyed, and her fingerprints removed with acid. Whoever she was, someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure she would never be identified. Police were called, and soon the scene became one of the most haunting crime sites in modern history. Around her body lay strange clues: half-burned clothes, water bottles, sleeping pills, and traces of benzene used to ignite the fire. Even stranger, all the labels from her clothing had been carefully cut away, as if her very identity had been erased piece by piece. Locals whispered about the Isdal Woman, and within hours, rumors spread that this was no ordinary death. Bergen was not a random place. It was near strategic military and intelligence sites, right in the middle of Cold War tensions. Norway was a quiet but crucial location where espionage often played out in shadows. What truly unsettled investigators was the planning behind it. This was not an accident, nor a random crime of passion. Every detail seemed orchestrated: the missing labels, the acid-scrubbed fingerprints, the burnt remains. They were the marks of someone who wanted to vanish without a trace, or someone who was deliberately made to disappear. Witnesses began to come forward, describing a mysterious woman who had been seen in Bergen days before. She was elegant, always alone, and spoke multiple languages with a heavy accent. She checked into hotels under false names, carrying strange luggage. To some, she seemed like a traveler. To others, like a spy. As news spread, fear gripped the region. Was she an international agent caught in the dangerous games of the Cold War? Or a woman running from a secret past that finally caught up with her? The burned body in the valley was not just a crime scene. It was the opening chapter of a mystery that still remains unsolved more than 50 years later. A mystery that questions not just who she was, but why such a powerful effort was made to erase her from history. And so, the story of the Isdal Woman begins. A nameless figure who may have carried the secrets of nations to her grave. When investigators searched the Isdal Woman's remains, they quickly realized this was no ordinary case. Every clue was designed to confuse, not to reveal. The valley was cold, silent, and eerily untouched except for the burned body and the strange arrangement of items left behind. Near her lay 12 sleeping pill bottles, some empty, others half full. A broken umbrella rested on the rocks, and water bottles had been neatly placed beside her. To the police, it seemed staged, as if someone wanted them to see the scene a certain way. But the biggest shock came from her clothing. Every single label, every tag that could reveal where her dress or shoes had been bought, had been cut out with precision. Whoever did this was careful. Too careful. Even her fingerprints had been sanded down and treated with acid, making identification nearly impossible. When they examined her belongings further, things became even stranger. Inside her suitcase, which was later found at a railway station, investigators discovered wigs, multiple pairs of glasses with no prescription, and coded notes that looked like travel itineraries. Passports under false names also surfaced, suggesting she had been living a double or even triple life. The case was no longer just about a dead woman. It was about an identity, or rather, the deliberate destruction of one. Authorities began piecing together her movements, and what they uncovered pointed directly to espionage. Norway in the 1970s was caught between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The Cold War had made Scandinavia a silent battlefield of spies, informants, and secret operations. Bergen itself was close to military installations and NATO activities, making the presence of a mysterious traveler in the area far from coincidence. The woman had checked into several hotels in Norway under at least 8 different names. She always paid in cash, carried no credit cards, and when asked where she was from, her answers shifted. Sometimes she claimed to be Belgian, other times German. even once saying she was from South Africa. To staff, she was polite but distant, always keeping to herself, as though she was hiding behind an invisible wall. Her physical appearance was equally hard to pin down. Witnesses described her as striking, with dark hair and fashionable clothes, but she often changed her style. Some remembered her wearing wigs. Others saw her with different accents, leaving investigators puzzled. Was she deliberately altering her look to throw people off? What investigators found was chilling. Here was a woman who had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal her past, and yet, in the moment of her death, her carefully constructed secrets came undone. The Isdal woman was not meant to be remembered, but the clues she left behind whispered of a hidden world where shadows moved in silence. Imagine a stranger who drifts through cities like a ghost, changing names as easily as others change clothes. That was the Isdal woman. Police soon traced her trail across Norway and Europe. In hotels from Bergen to Oslo, from Stavanger to Paris, she appeared under different identities, using at least 8 aliases. Each name sounded foreign but believable. Claudia Tielt, Vera Schlosseneck, Alexia Zarne-Merches. None of them led to real people. Each was a mask. At every stop, she followed a pattern. She requested a room with a balcony or a good view. She carried little luggage but often brought stylish clothes, perfumes, and wigs. She ordered meals in fluent French, German, and sometimes broken English, switching languages effortlessly. Staff remembered her as elegant, perhaps even aristocratic, but always guarded, as though she feared someone might be watching. One of the most haunting details was her behavior in public. Witnesses recalled her sitting alone in restaurants, staring out of windows with a distracted, almost paranoid look. At other times, she was seen speaking quietly to unknown men in lobbies or cafes, but never for long. She seemed to live in fragments, never allowing anyone to get too close. In her suitcases, police discovered journals filled with coded numbers. At first glance, they looked meaningless, but investigators later realized they matched dates and places of her travels. This suggested her journeys weren't random. They were missions. She was on assignments, and the codes were her personal way of tracking them. Yet even more bizarre was the discovery of multiple pairs of eyeglasses, some with lenses, others without. None were prescription, which meant they were disguises. Alongside the wigs and false names, the Isdal woman appeared to be a master of reinvention. Every city, every hotel, was a new life, a new mask. Still, despite her efforts to vanish into the background, she left behind traces of unease. A Bergen shopkeeper recalled selling her rubber boots. A taxi driver remembered her speaking German with a strange accent. Even a hotel maid noted she often burned cigarette ends down to the filter, as though nervous or deep in thought. As investigators pieced these fragments together, a chilling picture emerged. This was not a lost traveler or a tourist. She moved with the precision of someone following orders, someone who belonged to a world where secrecy was survival and exposure meant death. The Isdal woman lived in the shadows, but shadows, no matter how dark, always leave a trace. She was not just a mystery in Norway. Her footsteps stretched across borders, weaving through the very heart of Cold War Europe. Investigators discovered that the Isdal woman had traveled extensively, not just in Norway, but across the continent. Hotel registers revealed her presence in Paris, Brussels, Hamburg, and Rome. Each time she appeared, her identity was new. Passports under fresh names, addresses that didn't exist, and nationalities that seemed invented. Yet her handwriting and signature carried the same strange elegance, betraying her as the same elusive figure. In Rome, she was spotted buying expensive clothing and perfume, luxuries that seemed beyond the means of an ordinary tourist. In Brussels, she checked into hotels near key government buildings. In Hamburg, she was seen speaking quietly with businessmen who vanished before police could trace them. Every city left behind fragments, like pieces of a puzzle deliberately scattered. The most chilling part was her precision. She never stayed long. She paid in cash, often carried only small bags, and spoke to no one beyond what was necessary. In one hotel, she was remembered for sitting by herself, chain-smoking while staring at the entrance, as though waiting for someone, or fearing who might walk in. Her presence in Norway was particularly suspicious. Bergen was close to military research sites and NATO installations. At the time, tensions between the West and the Soviet Union ran high, and Scandinavia was a silent chessboard where both sides moved their pawns in secret. Could she have been a courier, carrying messages across Europe, or a spy gathering intelligence on sensitive operations? Some witnesses later claimed to have seen her accompanied by men in suits, speaking German or French. Others believed she traveled with secretive groups, only to vanish from them the next day. There were even reports that she sometimes pretended to be a traveling antiques dealer, while other times she introduced herself as an art collector. The Isdal Woman's European trail made one thing clear. She was no ordinary citizen. She was a woman who belonged to a network, perhaps one tied to espionage, covert surveillance, or even black market intelligence. Her disguises and constant movement suggested not leisure but strategy, a life spent one step ahead of discovery. And yet, despite her meticulous planning, her journey ended in the icy valley of Isdalen, in flames. It was as though she had been erased, just as she had lived, in fragments, in shadows, and in silence. She moved like a phantom across Europe. But phantoms, too, must one day face the light. Sometimes, the truth hides not in words, but in the silent objects left behind. For the Isdal woman, her suitcase spoke louder than any witness. Days after her burned body was discovered, police traced a piece of luggage left in a Bergen railway station. Inside was a collection of items that deepened the enigma. Clothing with every label carefully cut out, multiple wigs of different styles and colors, and sunglasses with ordinary glass lenses, not prescriptions. Each item seemed like a tool for reinvention, as though she carried entire identities folded into her luggage. But the strangest finds were the notes written in a secret code. At first, the police thought they were meaningless scribbles, lines of letters and numbers, cryptic marks across small notepads. Later, investigators realized the code described her movements, trains she had taken, hotels she had stayed in, and destinations that matched her aliases. It was a personal map of her hidden life. Among the belongings, they also found prescriptions for eczema cream, written in German, and traces of a strange, unfamiliar scent on her clothes. The cream hinted at a possible medical condition, while the perfume was expensive, the kind used by women of wealth or sophistication. These details gave the impression of someone both practical and refined, someone who lived with purpose rather than chance. Her belongings suggested more than espionage. There were items of luxury, fine shoes, stylish clothing, but no trace of family letters, photographs, or personal keepsakes. Not a single item tied her to a home, a country, or even a memory. It was as if her past had been deliberately erased, her suitcase carrying only the bare bones of survival and disguise. The wigs hinted at a deeper game. Witnesses in Norway and across Europe recalled her appearance changing constantly. Sometimes she was brunette, other time as blonde. Sometimes she wore her hair short, other times styled long. The glasses, too, gave her different personas. A fashionable traveler one day, a serious businesswoman the next. Police were stunned by the precision of it all. This was not the behavior of a lost soul or a random drifter. This was the toolkit of a woman who lived multiple lives at once, someone whose very survival depended on staying invisible. And yet, despite these elaborate disguises, her end came violently, brutally, and publicly, as though whoever ended her life wanted to send a message. The suitcase only raised more questions. Was she caught between rival spy networks? Was she a double agent who knew too much? Or was she a pawn sacrificed in a larger game? The suitcase was not just luggage. It was a confession in silence, a diary without words, holding the keys to a life lived in shadows. What if the Isdal woman wasn't just a traveler, but a pawn in a dangerous game between nations? A game where silence was survival, and exposure meant death. By the 1970s, Europe was divided, torn by Cold War tension. Norway, though small, sat on a critical fault line between NATO's Western powers and the Soviet Union's Eastern Bloc. Military research, nuclear intelligence, and naval positioning all made Scandinavia a hotspot for espionage. In this secret war of shadows, spies weren't soldiers. They were invisible ghosts, slipping across borders in plain sight. The Isdal Woman's movements mirrored exactly what intelligence agents of the time were known to do. False identities, multiple languages, carefully coded notes, and constant travel through politically sensitive regions. It was the perfect disguise of an undercover operative. Bergen itself was home to sensitive NATO operations, and her presence there could hardly have been coincidence. Some investigators believed she might have been gathering intelligence on military tests. Others speculated she was a courier, carrying messages or materials across Europe. The wigs, the glasses, the multiple aliases, each pointed to the tools of tradecraft used by spies. Even her evasive behavior in hotels suggested a woman on alert, someone always looking over her shoulder. And then came the most chilling thought. If she was indeed involved in espionage, then her death wasn't an accident. It was an execution. The fire, the destruction of fingerprints, the cut clothing labels, all designed not just to kill her body, but to erase her very identity. But here's where I want you to step in. Think about this. If you found yourself face to face with a person like the Isdal woman, who lived under masks and shadows, what would you do? Would you try to trust them? Or would you fear them? And more importantly, do you think she was as a spy who paid the ultimate price? Or just an innocent woman caught in the wrong place at the wrong time? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this is where the mystery grows darker, and your perspective might change how we see her story. The Cold War wasn't fought on battlefields. It was fought in whispers, in lies, and in identities like hers. How do you solve a murder when the victim herself seems designed to vanish? The Isdal woman wasn't just killed, she was erased. As the investigation deepened, Norwegian police faced an unusual problem. Every answer they uncovered only created more questions. Dental records suggested she had undergone expensive dental work in Latin America, yet her accent seemed Germanic. Clothing traced back to luxury shops in Italy and Paris carried no identifiable labels. Every clue pointed in multiple directions, leaving investigators lost in a maze. Her fingerprints were destroyed by fire, but fragments remained. These were sent to international agencies, including Interpol, but no match was ever found. How could a woman so well-traveled, so visible in hotels and public spaces, leave no official trace in any database? It was as though she had been carefully engineered to live outside the system. Witnesses added to the puzzle rather than solving it. Some described her as strikingly beautiful, with dark eyes and high cheekbones. Others claimed she looked tired, even haunted, as if carrying a burden invisible to those around her. A Bergen shopkeeper remembered her buying a men's style jacket, oddly out of character for her otherwise elegant appearance. A hotel clerk recalled her requesting a balcony room, yet drawing the curtains tightly shut as soon as she entered. Then there was the cigarette smoke, always constant, always lingering around her. People who met her noted that she chain-smoked nervously, as if time itself was running out. It gave her an air of fragility beneath the calculated disguises, like a performer whose mask sometimes slipped. Investigators even tried to trace the origins of the objects in her suitcase. The matchboxes, the bottles of perfume, the coded notes. Each object told a story, but none of them reached an ending. They were fragments of lives she lived, but never belonged to. And yet, the more police searched, the more they realized something chilling. Someone else had gone to great lengths to cover her tracks. The missing clothing labels, the destroyed identification marks, even the fire that consumed her body. These weren't random acts. They were deliberate erasures. The Isdal woman wasn't simply a victim of chance. She was the victim of design. Someone wanted her to disappear, not only from the world of the living, but from memory itself. She was a puzzle with missing pieces. But in her case, someone had stolen the pieces on purpose. When facts fade into silence, theories rise like ghosts. And in the case of the Isdal woman, those ghosts refused to rest. As police struggled to crack her identity, the world outside Norway began spinning its own theories. Journalists, intelligence experts, and conspiracy enthusiasts all stepped in where evidence had stopped. The first and most powerful theory, espionage. Her disguises, coded notes, and constant travel across Europe mirrored exactly the methods of Cold War spies. Many believed she was working for one of the great powers, perhaps even double-crossing both. If true, her death was not random. It was a silencing, carried out with precision. Others leaned toward darker ideas. Could she have been part of illegal arms trade, smuggling secrets of military technology? Her presence in Bergen, near NATO installations, was a red flag. Some suggested she may have been gathering information on missile testing or nuclear submarines, dangerous knowledge that could easily make her a target. A second wave of theories painted her as a runaway. Perhaps she had once belonged to an intelligence network, but defected, running across borders to escape her past. If so, her death might have been punishment, not for what she did, but for daring to leave. But then came the haunting human theories. Some suggested she was a woman living outside the lines, changing identities not for politics, but for survival. Maybe she was hiding from an abusive past, debts, or even family ties. Her wigs, her coded notes, her restless movements, all tools not of espionage, but of escape. Still, others whispered of something stranger. Witnesses described her as distant, watchful, often chain-smoking as though expecting danger. Could she have known her life was in constant jeopardy? Was her death an inevitable end to a life lived too close to secrets? Even the method of her death became part of the speculation. Why fire? Why such a brutal attempt to erase her fingerprints and identity? Some believed it was meant as a warning to others, a message in flames for anyone who dared betray the wrong people. Others saw it as symbolic, a cleansing meant to burn away the last trace of who she had been. The Isdal woman's story became not just a mystery, but a mirror, reflecting the paranoia of the Cold War era. To some she was a spy, to others a fugitive, to still others a victim of forces too vast to escape. The truth hides in shadows, but in her case, even the shadows refuse to give it up. Some mysteries remain unsolved, not because answers don't exist, but because someone makes sure they're never found. As months turned into years, the Isdal woman's case slipped further into silence. Despite witness statements, coded notes, and the suitcase of secrets, her identity was never uncovered. In time, her remains were buried in Bergen, her coffin marked only by a small plaque. No family claimed her. No embassy stepped forward. She was laid to rest as the world's most mysterious stranger. But behind the scenes, rumors began to circulate. Police officers who worked the case later admitted that strange pressures surrounded the investigation. Some files were restricted. Others quietly disappeared. Leads that seemed promising were suddenly closed without explanation. It was as if invisible hands were steering the case away from the truth. Decades later, journalists revisited the mystery, digging into archives and re-interviewing surviving witnesses. What they found only deepened the darkness. The coded notes were never fully explained. and the hotel records of her aliases suggested she had been operating across at least 4 countries under different names. Yet no intelligence agency, not NATO, not the Soviets, ever officially acknowledged her existence. DNA tests were eventually attempted, but due to the state of her remains, results were inconclusive. The few fragments suggested Central European origins, perhaps even ties to German or Austrian ancestry, but nothing definitive. Just enough to spark theories, never enough to provide closure. Then came whispers of NATO secrecy. Bergen was close to sensitive military testing sites, and in the early 1970s, Norway played a critical role in Cold War defense strategy. Could the Isdal woman have stumbled upon something she was never meant to see? Or was she silenced because she herself was part of a hidden operate? Ion. Even today, retired investigators express quiet unease. They admit they were likely dealing with forces far beyond their control, forces that ensured this woman's life and death would never be fully understood. To them, it was less a failure of police work and more the reality of clashing powers, where truth is the first casualty. The Isdal woman remains nameless, faceless, voiceless, not because she never had an identity, but because someone ensured we would never know it. What is more terrifying, death itself, or being erased so completely that even your name is forgotten? The Isdal woman's story ends where it began, in silence. Her body was discovered burned beyond recognition, her life scattered in fragments of false identities and half-truths, and her death sealed by forces too powerful to challenge. Decades later, she remains one of the most haunting mysteries of modern Europe. No one knows who she loved, what language she spoke to her family, or what dreams she carried across borders. All that is left are fragments, burnt bones in a coffin, coded notes in a suitcase, and witnesses who remember her eyes as both watchful and weary. She has no headstone with her real name, no family flowers, only a plaque marking the grave of a woman who lived a life of shadows. And maybe that is the most chilling part. We live in a world of records, passports, documents, photographs, yet here was a person who left almost nothing behind, as though she had been designed to vanish. Her story is not just about death, but about erasure. About how someone can walk among us, stay in our hotels, buy our clothes, speak our languages, and still remain a stranger. Theories will continue. Spy, fugitive, runaway, or victim of something darker. But the truth lies locked away in files that may never be opened, or buried with people who swore never to speak. So I'll leave you with this. When you think of the Isdal woman, do you see her as a ghost of the Cold War, a nameless spy who paid the price of betrayal? Or do you see her as a tragic figure, a woman desperate to live free, only to be silenced forever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective keeps this mystery alive, because every story told, every theory shared, pushes back against the silence. And if you want more journeys into the world's darkest unsolved mysteries, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who loves stories that refuse to fade. She had no name in life. Let us not let her story die in death.